His was the only boat to arrive.
I think maybe it was a cow. I don't know.
There's the thank you letter from Lyndon Johnson.
There was even a monorail at one point to the east of us.
Plus, everybody forgets about pirates.
This is the coolest field trip I have ever been on.
I don't know, but I've been told, keep on dancing, won't ever get old.
Hello, and welcome to the Long Island History Project, the podcast that brings you stories and interviews with people passionate about Long Island history. You can hear them all at longislandhistoryproject.org. My name is Chris Kretz, and I am your host. And our opening music is courtesy of the Homegrown String Band. Today we're taking one more look at the American Revolution on Long Island in celebration of the 250th anniversary. And this time we got very special access to a very special place. First, let me introduce our very special guest.
I'm Joshua Ruff, and I am Co-Executive Director, Collections and Programming at the Long Island Museum.
Early one weekday morning recently, Joshua was nice enough to give me a private tour before the crowds of the current exhibit at the museum, The Seat of Action, Long Island in the American Revolution and Beyond. So what you're going to hear over the next 30 minutes or so is Joshua taking us all on our own private tour. He's going to point out some highlights of the exhibit, where the items came from, how they survived, how you interpret them, a peek into how museums go about organizing these types of exhibits. But before you start, you might be asking yourself, hey, hasn't the Long Island Museum tackled this subject before?
We've done this before in different exhibitions where it's just been a kind of small subset or section, but this was an effort to try to really sort of explore it in as many dimensions as we could, and also to explore it not just from the side of Revolutionary War soldiers, but the people that were living here in occupied territory during those years, to look at all of the conversations about loyalism and patriotism, and really, again, to work with some wonderful collectors and collections. Maybe we'll start right over here around the corner. And what we thought that we would do with the start of the exhibition was a small vignette. This is a house that is at the eve of the Revolution. And so we have original furniture from the museum's collection, a couple of fiddleback chairs, a tea table, all from the right period. The chair to my right is a chair that was owned by Captain Felita Smith from Smithtown, and we know of his service in the Continental Army during the Revolution. And then there are other objects throughout that really help to basically bring people into the moment. A reproduction New York Regiment 3 uniform and tricorn hat, also a musket on loan from private collector Art Biladello from Setauket. And these items all basically help to explore and think about just sort of what that moment was like in the summer of 1776. Moving through this vignette, we have an early section, Long Island on the Eve of the Revolution, and this is a map from Thomas Kitchen, who was an English cartographer who never set foot in the New World, but he was working from a variety of different sources. And so we use this map because it's from mid-Revolution, actually. It's not from the eve, but it does give a really interesting picture of the different locations as they were known to British cartographers at the time. And that was one of the sort of curiosities of it that I most liked, was some of the things that we call out in the text. Beach of Sand and Stones, Fire Island, Horse Neck, Lloyd Neck, Settlecott, which is, of course, the indigenous community that still is here in the Setauket and Stony Brook area, which Settlecott is meant to represent Setauket in this. And Diana, which may have been the map maker's label for Tiana Beach or Hampton Bays. So just kind of giving a little original map glimpse, which was on loan to us from the special collections of Stony Brook University.
So as we walk through, we're sort of in a long rectangular room. Not to go too far into the weeds, but as you think about designing these exhibits, so we're kind of following a chronological path. How do you look at the space as you prepare each exhibit, and is it more like the objects help define the layout, or vice versa? Or?
That's an insightful way of putting it. Yeah, I think so. I think that basically you start with a little bit of a storyline and the things that you want to try to tell the story and explore and explain, and all of the essential parts of that you really want people to understand. But then to kind of follow that up, there's a huge visual side to all of this. And so as you're looking across the gallery, you're seeing some of our larger 19th century portraits from William Sidney Mount, which make an appearance, and you don't see any of them too clustered in one area. They're really meant to kind of break up the space and give you sort of larger scale features and portraits to kind of take a look at. It's a good size space, this gallery. We also wanted that initial place where people could walk in to be a reveal and something that you could kind of see through the window, but then only once you come around the corner, you're able to like take in the vignette. And so over here we have, throughout the exhibition, we're using 19th and 20th and even 21st century paintings to help tell some of the stories that we see here.
Which is interesting. Through the 19th century, there was not much, or you could argue, but the views didn't change too much over the 19th century. So the artists painting these pictures, the landscapes they were seeing were somewhat similar to what would have been there in 1770.
Yeah, I mean, with some little bit of dramatic license and a little bit of, for example, the Klaus Hoy painting over here of East Hampton, the Mulford Farm, and the windmill in the background. It's a very compressed view, and it's showing these buildings a little bit closer to each other than they actually are. But we used it just to kind of, again, help to propel the storyline and tell us a few of the stories of some of the people that were here, David Mulford, and others who were involved in the East End's war efforts. This is a painting from a contemporary artist named David Bunn Martine. David is a Shinnecock artist who lives out on the Shinnecock Reservation. People that are familiar with the books of John Strong will be very familiar with David's work. He's an exceptional artist. I don't think that anyone does narrative form paintings of Long Island's indigenous communities, especially from this time period, with the detail and the exceptional skill that David does. And I think that this allowed us to really get into a little bit of, as we're trying to talk about, some of the additional storylines that are involved in the Revolution that often don't come out and are often not explored in a telling like this. And, I think for both the Haudenosaunee in upstate New York and some of the New England native groups such as the Wampanoag, the Pequots, and then down here on Long Island, all of the various indigenous groups, from the Montaukets to the Shinnecocks to the Matinnecocks and so forth. There was a lot of very careful and considered either neutrality on the one hand, trying not to get drawn into the war. Samson Occum, who was a native preacher, counseled for a lot of Native Americans not to involve themselves in the Revolution. He's pictured over there off to the right. And yet at the same time, there were certainly Native people that ended up on some of the American privateer boats. There were Native people that fought in the Battle of Stockbridge up in the Bronx. So I think that, again, on both sides, of course, the British attempted, generally speaking, to often use indigenous ties to their advantage and attempted to get a lot of involvement and assistance from indigenous groups. Looking kind of further here, there's the same section, because we're not quite in the Revolution
We're
yet.
getting there.
We're getting there. We have a New York Gazette from 1757, a newspaper that is a rare surviving mid-18th century example. This, again, is from the museum's collection. And I thought it was very interesting to give people the opportunity to get up close to what ended up becoming one of the important pieces of news that people got in the lead up to the Revolution from the New York Gazette and into the early years of the Revolution as well. During this period, they're covering the French and Indian War, and there are several extended stories in the example that you see here, as well as on the flip side, there are ads for runaway enslaved people that were escaping from the bonds of slavery from western Long Island, extreme western Long Island, Brooklyn, and other portions of the readership's location. So just kind of moving on, we have a number. Now we're in the Revolution.
Yeah,
the Battle of Long Island, which of course happens in August 27th.
We're about a month away now.
1776. Yeah, we're coming close to the anniversary of that now. And the couple of documents here that we have, one is a collection from Special Collections, Stony Brook University, and they all relate to Oliver Soper, who was a captain for the 13th Continental Infantry in Massachusetts, who fought with his troops. He was there when George Washington gave the Declaration of Independence speech, but also when he basically tried to inspire the troops to go out and fight bravely. And so he has a transcript of that on the right, and then on the left-hand side, there's a list of basically remaining troops that he was responsible for after the Battle of Long Island, and it is quite a devastating loss. He has a total of 27 fit for duty out of the 71 that he started with.
So was he in the battle?
Yes.
He survived it.
He survived it. He ended up living to 1821, but I think it's a really important and interesting document. This is a case with objects from the Brooklyn History Collection, Brooklyn Public Library Center for Brooklyn History, and they include back there a stoneware jug, which was apparently used by Isaac Newman, a 14-year-old team driver. It was a jug that he purportedly brought whiskey to the troops in. And we have an iron shutter tieback from the Brevert House in Brooklyn, which was a house not that John Andre was captured in, but rather General William Howe bivouacked in after the Battle of Long Island. There's a lot of objects that have stories that I think are really compelling, and they kind of tie back to, you never know. Is it true? Is it false? Is it... This is one. This is from the Smith family. It's from the Caleb Smith house, Caleb Smith First House, which is now the state park off of Middle Country Road. And it's a crewel bed hanging panel, beautifully embroidered. It's one of the most gorgeous things in the exhibition. And it is purportedly what Caleb Smith's wife wrapped the family silver in as the British were approaching. That does sound like an apocryphal story for sure. Do we know that it happened? Does it seem a little crazy that one of the nicest crewel bed hangings would be used for such a purpose? Who knows? But I think again, there's so many objects like this that come sort of layered with stories.
With stories, yeah. So as a museum professional, is it you can't prove it, but you pass those along as, hey, this is what we've heard, or this is... Well,
that's what, yeah. And in the text, in the panel there, we definitely don't say this is what happened. We say that this is the story that's
been passed down.
That may be apocryphal and may not be true. This front section is really meant to kind of convey the story of the Battle of Long Island, and it obviously has the title sign as well. And the work of Don Troiani, who I think Revolutionary War buffs really are aware of as a great contemporary artist. He does a lot of scenes from throughout the Revolution. We have a few of his works on display through the gallery. This one is from the moment that the Maryland Regiment was pinned down at the start of the Battle of Long Island. And it's, I think, for many of us who typically just see this scene by Alonzo Chappell, which is showing a kind of a similar moment, maybe the same moment. This is maybe the closest view that we would get to the battle. So I think it's a great way to start the exhibition. And then overhead, over top here, we have a gun from Ichabod Rayner of East Hampton. And Chris, what would you notice sort of when you look at this and you look at some of the other
long
guns?
Rifle? Yeah.
It is a very long rifle. Yeah. It's a long musket. It's been actually extended for hunting. So this is originally from the collection of Rex Metcalf of Huntington, and the Huntington Historical Society has its own exhibition right now, which has a lot of his personal effects. But this is a great provenance item that was used in the Revolution. Over here we have some other items which are sort of interesting, a couple of documents indicating sort of how, passing through the occupied territory, you needed permission passes, you needed to be able to kind of travel freely. And here are two examples of that. One is a parole passage for Benjamin Floyd, Lieutenant Colonel Benjamin Floyd. And that was after he was released from prison in 1778 and was just attempting to get back home. And then down below we have an unidentified Mrs. Floyd, we're not sure exactly which Mrs. Floyd, who is attempting to travel back to Huntington, and she is carrying a quantity of material of silk and other fabrics. So it really was, this was a difficult time frame for people to live through. They could not just sort of come and go freely. They had to really move under documentation and under observation, and it was a difficult time. Over here we have contemporary artists' view of Liss. Liss was an enslaved woman who was under slavery from the Townsend family in Oyster Bay, and her story is told here. Her experiences are also really well documented by Claire Bellergeau.
Yeah, we've spoken with her. So this is actually, anyone who knows her book will recognize this cover
they will
image.
certainly recognize this and recognize the story. And Claire is graciously coming here to do a program.
Oh, great.
Over behind you, these are a few interesting things.
Some swords.
There's so this is a sword from Richard Hewlett. It's been in the Hewlett family for all of these years, since Hewlett's death in 1789. It's been passed down, and it was loaned to us by John Hewlett. And
now, just to recap, Richard Hewlett, and I'm thinking more to the Culper story and the TV series, but he was a loyalist.
He was a loyalist. He lived in New Rockaway, actually, and he was with Loyalist Delancey's brigade, and the sword is French made. He ended up, as many loyalists did after the war, ended up going to Nova Scotia, and it's really fortunate and wonderful that it was saved by his family. John Hewlett, who loaned it to us, a former social studies teacher, Newsday covered the story of both the documentation of it and the sword many years ago. So we were very grateful to be able to borrow that from him.
Now, if I can ask, because we're looking at it through the case here.
Yeah.
Have you held this sword? I'm looking at the handle. I don't know if he had smaller hands, but it seems like a short handle.
It's a very short pommel. It's extremely the sword is definitely for a smaller sized hand, no doubt.
And have you in the course of your professional duties held the sword up, or?
Yeah, I mean, in the course of professional duties with gloves on my hands, just placing the object, it's definitely not sort of thinking about how it would be if I were using it, but it's certainly for, as you know, it's definitely for a much smaller person. And then to the right of that, this is probably the object that's in the exhibition that gets the most questions or the sort of most curiosity. It is a combination sword and pistol, and it is French made. They definitely were used. There's documentation of their use, both in the Revolutionary War and also the War of 1812. And it literally is something that, if one does in one way doesn't work, then you try the other way. You have to,
yeah. So it's got a little right above the hilt. There's a gun with the trigger is right above the. I guess that's the hilt, and then so I guess the bullet would travel along the length of the blade, or hopefully not bounce off the blade.
Right, exactly, in kind of a close quarters situation when you're fighting. So it's definitely one of those things that when we were putting the exhibition together, it was news to me. I had never seen anything like it and hadn't really known about it before. And then we do have another section back here, which we can take a brief look at. One of the best connections I think that we made in this exhibition was with David Griffin. And I don't know if David has been.
We've talked to him. Yep,
has been on your program. Yep. So David has really done a lot of great work on the subject of British fortifications and has a wonderful collection of archaeological items, as you know, and so we were able to borrow some 70 items here from him in these two cases that you're looking at. Kind of most interesting of all, I think, all of the variations of what you can do with a musket ball when you're a bored British soldier sitting at the encampment. All of the different game pieces or poker pieces. Maybe you're sitting around a campfire and you want to create like a tiny little bird toy for your daughter, and you have that sort of off to the right. So it's just really imaginative and interesting.
So this is all musket art.
Those are, basically musket balls that have been compressed and turned into all of the different things that you could possibly use. We have elsewhere different types of belt buckles and shoe buckles, some British coins of King George III, and all of these were found at Lloyd's Neck, at Fort Franklin, Fort Nonsense of Jericho, all of the different locations that David has been involved in over the years in some of his digs. Now, over to your right, I want to show you the star of the exhibition.
Okay, here we go.
This is a portrait by John Ramage. It is a small, delicate, painted on ivory, watercolor on ivory, portrait of Benjamin Tallmadge. And it was one of the most important things at the beginning of the process of starting this exhibition. We reached out to Litchfield Historical Society. We knew that they were going to be doing a lot of their own Tallmadge stories he moved, this year. And
just to backtrack, and most people will know this. So he was a Setauket native, dragoon, right, under Washington, ran the Culper Spy ring. So after the war, he relocated to Litchfield. Is that the? That's correct.
Okay. Yeah, and that's where he would live throughout the course of the rest of his life. That's where he would end up being a successful businessman. So the Litchfield Historical Society has tons and tons of his papers. They have several other portraits of him, which are well known. We did not want to borrow that as much as this portrait, which is the only view, at least in painted form, of him in uniform. And it's right at the end of the war. It's at 1783. John Ramage was somebody who did miniature portraits of lots of other famous participants of the war. And it I just think is one of those small items that when we know all of the stories of Tallmadge, we know, as you said, the backdrop of the Culper Spy ring. It's just wonderful to have a chance to share this with people and have people be able to relate and connect to him at that moment of 1783. And then this was so key to us. I've never been as excited kind of in the process of putting this exhibit together to be able to get the positive yes from Litchfield that we could borrow this. And we have over here the museum's Culper Spy letter. And this is a letter from Tallmadge to Robert Townsend from November 8th, 1779. And the backstory of this letter is as interesting as the letter itself. The backstory for us is that it was in the museum's collection all the way back to the 1950s, but it had kind of fallen out of cataloging record databases. And so during COVID, like a lot of institutions, we redoubled our efforts to try to go back and go do line item inventories and surveys of parts of the collection that we didn't really have a great deal of information on. And as we were doing that, our curator, Jonathan Oley, stumbled upon a box that had this document in it. We didn't sort of understand all of the significance of it. We didn't realize that this is the only letter to exist between Tallmadge and Robert Townsend that's still in a collection that exists. And it basically also uncovers or talks about the invisible ink and taking great responsibility and care for not being discovered. Mm-hmm. It uses some of the code language that has been found and recognized in other letters. So it's a precious, precious relic, an item to the museum's collection. It was authenticated by Christie's, so we went through the process to make sure that it was, in fact, what it purported to be. And then, normally we bring it out once a year for Culper Spy Day. So this year it has a longer-term showing. Okay. And then, of course, because it is very light sensitive, and you can probably notice that we're standing under practically zero light. You can still see it, but it's being very, very well protected here.
What strikes is interesting because we've looked at a few contemporary documents, and one thing that I noticed at this one. So obviously, if you think of the provenance, it was sent probably by very secret courier in Austin Row, maybe. Yeah. Got it to Townsend. It's interesting that he kept it, or somehow it survived. He kept it after the war, but you can see the fold. So it was folded very small.
Right. Exactly.
Which kind of tells some of that story.
That tells the story of how much they wanted to protect it and keep it from the possible discovery, which I think is something that you often see.
And then yet he put it in a drawer or something and still saved it, whether as a souvenir or as proof or something.
Yeah. The last section of the exhibition gets into sort of the victory, the post-war rebuilding, conversations about the end of slavery in New York State. We have a really, I think, a wonderful and important painting here from Shepherd Alonzo Mount, who was the brother to the more famous William Sidney Mount. It's a painting of Tamer Wren, who was born in 1794 and lived until at least 1880. That's the last documentation that we have of her life from census records. We don't know where Tamer is buried, but she appears both in manumission records from the family of William Wickham Mills. And, she did a lot of her work at the Mills Pond House, just literally a little bit more than a mile away from the museum. And Chris, this is one of the more important images in New York State, in all of New York State, of a previously enslaved person. It's not done from historical records. It's not done later on. This is from 1830. And Shepherd Alonzo Mount was related to the Mills family, so Tamer was somebody that he would have known through childhood. Also, the Mount house was very, relatively close to the Mills Pond house. So the expression that she has in the painting, and she's looking at with recognition, I think it's a powerful work. She is somebody that clearly is projecting at least a little bit of an air of confidence and an air of familiarity. This is in a private family's collection. It's been borrowed for different exhibitions before, but I think that this helps us to talk a little bit about the story of how slavery after the Revolution would eventually go towards the emancipation of slaves in New York State, the gradual emancipation. So just we're kind of finishing up here. We have original fan from Washington's inauguration that it says was held by Martha Smith, but actually was more likely to have been held by Martha Smith's mother, Elizabeth Van Wyck Smith. And she was born in Woodbury and, of course, was tied to the Smiths of Smithtown. We also have a pensioner's document, a pensioner claim from the early 1830s, and that's another important part of the story is many of these former soldiers grow older in life, and their ability to collect pensions improves gradually from 1818 until the mid-1830s. This again is a document from the museum's collection. And then we finish up the exhibition. There's there's a small video which tells the story of all of the work that's been done on cemetery preservation. I think in the lead up to America 250, there have been lots of groups across the island that have been doing wonderful work out in cemeteries across the region. And this was simply an effort not to document all of that, but rather just to show some cemeteries from the area, from Smithtown to Setauket to Sag Harbor, and the old Prospect Cemetery in Queens, which is one of the oldest cemeteries on Long Island. All of these just to kind of show some of the people that were in service or people that were just alive during the Revolution as well, which is kind of the theme of the entire exhibition, really talking about not just people that were in uniform, but people who were wearing regular clothing but fighting for their lives and living and adjusting to a really, really difficult time in our history.
Are you surprised? I'm always surprised or interested in what survived. And this is a good example, walking through this, of the fact that so much of this history persisted, was saved, whether intentionally or accidentally. For a place that was occupied, it would seem we're lucky to have anything. But as a museum professional, go back to that, what do you think of the amount of material that you were able to put together?
I think that there could have been so many ways to do this exhibition. I think that there are wonderful collections of items across the island. And so for us, this was as much of an opportunity to kind of bring out items that were in the museum's collection that had never been used to tell this story. Mm-hmm. You know, some of the paintings that we see in this gallery that we've talked about, they're 19th century paintings. They're William Sidney Mount paintings. But they harken back because Reverend Zachariah Green over there, the fighting parson from Setauket, he had an incredible story to tell going into service at the age of 16, and he was there when Washington read the Declaration of Independence. So I think that your question is a great one. Why are things saved? You know, why do people end up holding on to the memories of way back when? But I think that an exhibition is a challenge to put together with kind of existing records. And then also the other part of it for us was that we knew that everyone was going to be doing their own stories and trying to cover a lot of the same territory. For the Long Island Museum, our mission is really to collect and tell the stories of the entire region. So for us, that was something that made it important to not just look in our own backyard here in Stony Brook and Setauket, but the East End and the experiences of the Battle of Long Island, the fall of Long Island in Brooklyn. The entire region had a lot of their own personal experiences, their own community experiences, and this was the best effort that we could make to kind of show that full story.
And first of all, a big thank you to Joshua and the museum's Ellen Linneman for hosting me the other morning, and special thanks to friend of the podcast, Chris Verga, for enabling all of this. Again, this exhibit is open to the public through October 18th of this year, so make sure you get down and see it. There's a lot of things we didn't get to describe. Some of this you're going to want to see yourself anyway. The museum is in Stony Brook, 1200 Route 25A, and for full disclosure, my day job is at the Stony Brook University Library, so I've seen some of these maps and documents in our special collections before, but it's really something you want to see in person. And as an added bonus, it turns out that a lot of the people that Joshua mentioned as we spoke have been guests on the show, so we'll mention 2 audio footnotes for you to check out. One is with Native American artist David Bunn Martine, who appeared on episode 20.
I grew up with my grandmother, so I grew up with a lot of good stories, a lot of history. History from the 1800s seemed quite immediate to me because she had a good memory, and I recorded a lot of them on tapes,
And David Griffin, the historian of British forts on the island, he was from episode 137.
I mean, part of the research was to collect battlefield artifacts that could start to speak about a position or speak about the fort and its history, and to also enlighten homeowners that own the property about what really happened, more history of what happened on their site.
So we hope you enjoyed that. Look to our show notes for links to related resources. That's at longislandhistoryproject.org. That does it for this episode. Our outro music is Capering by the Blue Dot Sessions, used under an Attribution 4.0 international license. And as always, thank you for listening.